Hey, welcome back. We're finishing up this helmet model today. So we've got this far. If you're not to this point, check out the other videos to get you to this point. First thing we want to do here is close up this visor. So the tool that we're going to use for this is our mesh tools, Append to Polygon. And the way this tool works is you start with a border edge. So you'll see that these are glowing a little bit darker green. So if I click on this one, it gives me pink options for where I can go next. I'm going to go straight across, and then you'll see I kind of have this directional arrow telling me what direction to continue. So I'm just going to go around clicking on these edges. You have to be a little bit careful. There is a possibility that you select, something way back here you can see. So you want to make sure you're actually selecting the right edge. And once we have this, we press enter, and now we have a face. Now this is a pretty ugly face. This has got some n-gons, and as one face, it can't really be wrapping around like this. So we want to add some geometry to support this. I'm going to go to my multi-cut in Mesh Tools and just add some geometry. I'm just pressing enter after I've created a line, an edge here. And I'm also going to create one. I can hold shift to go to my center points. And I can just continue this edge like so, and press enter. So we're just breaking these faces up so we don't have huge faces. You generally want to make sure that your geometry makes sense so you don't have huge faces with a bunch of tiny faces. Just have some better edge flow than that. So I can take a second to fix up some of these vertices. I think I'm gonna bring those down. You can bring these out a little bit so that this has a bit of a rounded shape to it. Okay, next step, we want to mirror this. In order to do this, I like checking out my other views because we want to make sure everything is lined up. So I'm in my top view now with an axis. So we've got an axis right here that's close, but you'll see I have a couple vertices here that are just jutting out, like this one, and this is going to cause issues. So what I'm going to do is select all these vertices along the edge, and then using my scale tool, I can just shove them into each other, so now they're perfectly aligned, and then go back to W, and I'm going to use a snap tool so I can snap to the grid. Now you could just click on the button to snap to the grid here. I like to use the hotkey and just hold down X. You'll see while I'm holding down X, this lights up, and then when I let go of X, it turns off. So I'm going to just move this over. You'll see it starts snapping to these different points, and of course I'm going to go line up to this edge. So back to object mode. Now we want to mirror this. It's a pretty simple process. Once you have everything lined up, go up to Mesh, and then Mirror. Now, I'm going to go to the box just so you can see these settings here because there are a few things that you might need to know. Right now, I'm looking at my axis and I can see that I do want to mirror this across the X. So X is selected and I'm going from the positive side to the negative side. So negative. If you have this oriented differently, you might need to change these. I also want to keep these merge border vertices. This means that all the vertices, once this flips, are going to sew together. Otherwise, you'd have to do that manually. So I'm going to just press mirror, and there we go. I've got a mirrored object. Okay, we're almost done with this. The last thing I just wanted to briefly talk about, in the tutorial, just so you know, they did go in and model these details, and that's something if you want to do, you're certainly welcome to do. Ultimately, you're just putting in the geometry needed, new edges here, so that you can move those around and then extrude these in. They even did the extrusion before they mirrored because you generally want to make sure all your details are pretty much done before you mirror this over. So lastly, I kind of have this hole here at the bottom. You could leave this as is, or we could fill this up. So if I want this just to be one solid model as if I was going to 3D print this or something, another tool that can be useful every now and then if you have a giant gaping hole like this is to just use Mesh Fill Hole, and that will fill that up for me. Now this is also an n-gon, so I have too many edges. I want four-sided to keep this proper. So I probably would want to clean this up as well, taking some of these edges and going across. Looks like I've got some triangles down here from my mirroring that I might want to fix up. That's one way to kind of clean everything and make this better edge flow in the end. Now, another thing that I could do, I'm just going to actually delete this border here, just to get rid of those tries. I don't really need that anyway. If I want, occasionally, this really depends on the shape that you've got, but you can just get an overall thickness and have this still be hollowed out, so that this could be something you could feasibly print. Right now, I've said this before, but these faces, when they're just by themselves like this, picture them as razor thin, super, super thin. So if I select all of my faces and do an extrusion, I can use R and just expand this out a little bit to get a thickness. Now this is going to break some areas, so when you do this, you have to really make sure you know what you're doing, and you have to inspect your model afterward. But you'll see this did give us a thickness for this model. But what it did do is it broke some of the inside faces through the outside. So I can just go through and select these faces here, press W, and bring them back up. Now you'll see I probably need to push them back. I've kind of got an edge here that's poking through, so shove them back a little bit. Looks like here we've got some edges that might be a problem. So might select some of those, move those down. So you usually do have to do some cleanup work if you do something like that, but that can save you a lot of time, and this is really not the most ideal geometry in the world. But if you just wanted kind of a hollowed out space there, so you're not just dealing with that geometry, that is one way to do it. Now, keep in mind, this created a lot of new geometry because now we have all these extra faces on the inside. So if you were doing this for something like a video game, you probably would not want to do that. And you might just leave this completely as it was when we had it. Let me see if I can undo back far enough here. One more. In this state, because this has less geometry to deal with, and you might just use that mesh fill hole. Let's select my object first. And just call it good. If they allow this n-gon, if this isn't going to be a problem, or add a little bit of extra geometry to fix the n-gon. But for something like a video game where you want fewer polygons, or even for an animation where you want less of a heavy scene to be working with, something like that is fine. So just wanted to give a couple options here on how to kind of potentially finish this object. And you can go through and add some more details, change this up however you want. And that is our completed helmet.